What's going on YouTube? Diddy here, and I am so excited to be back here once again bringing you yet another Pokemon trading card game online deck analysis and some example matches with that deck. Now, my apologies for the long delay. I know it's been several weeks, but I've just been going through a whole lot of stuff. I just moved into my first apartment with my girlfriend, and then there was this huge ordeal dealing with Comcast trying to get internet into our unit. Apparently, the people that lived here have never had internet previously, so it was this huge ordeal. Several appointments were made, complaining to our landlord, and Comcast respectively. Finally got it to work. Just got internet yesterday after about 2 weeks of living here, so it's been a big hassle, but it's working. The internet connection is actually great, so I'm now bringing you a deck that I made in between my previous upload and today. So taking a look at it here, I think that it's really competitively viable actually, and if you want to go ahead and throw some love, hit that like, comment, subscribe down below. So this is going to be my Politeam deck. I kind of had the idea of trying out the Furious Fists Politoed and Co, and then combining that with Seismitoad so that we got all these toads and frogs here today. So we'll go ahead and take a look at all of the Pokemon that are going to be rounding out this deck. So we're going to be starting off with the Politoed. That's going to be the most important card that we have in the deck to make the rest of it work as we do. I'm trying to get it to go. So it's a stage 2 Pokemon, 130 HP. It has the King's Song ability, which allows you to ignore all of the normal type energy requirements in all of the attack costs of your Poliwag, Poliwhirl, and Poliwrath's attacks. So this is really powerful when you use it with the other cards in this deck. It's got the Hyper Voice attack. You're pretty much never going to be using that. It requires a double colorless and a water energy to hit for 70 damage, so it's not particularly effective. However, with its King Song ability, you are going to be able to make use of Poliwag's Spiral Current, which prevents your opponent's active Pokemon from retreating, and it also confuses it for free, no energy. Probably won't be using that very often. The Poliwhirl is probably the best attacker in this deck, honestly, because it has the Finishing Blow attack, which hits for 50 for free if you have that King Song ability in play. But also, if your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it, it does 50 more. So you're hitting for 100 damage for free when you have that ability in play. Of course, you can also throw Muscle Band onto this and hit for 120 damage as well. So this Finishing Blow, ideally you'll be using that to finish off your opponent's Pokemon, but just a decent attacker in its own right. And then the Poliwrath has 2 attacks. The Steamroll hits for 60 and also 30 to a benched Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field. And then Submission for 2 water energy, and for free, if you do have the King Song ability or double colorless, you can do 130 damage, doing 30 damage to itself in recoil. So in this deck, we're running a 4-4 line of those Poliwag and Poliwhirls, and then 2 Politoads and 2 Poliwraths, just in case one of our Politoads is prized. We will be able to have another, so we can get that combination going. I'm running 2 Seismitoad-EXs. This is a familiar card if you've played the game at all. Obviously, with a Quaking Punch, does 30 for double colorless, and then your opponent can't play any item cards during their turn. It synergizes pretty well, just because it allows you not only to slow down your opponents because they can't play any item cards, but it has decent damage output, uses the double colorless, which we are running in this deck, and also has the Grenade Hammer attack, which again does 130 damage, just like the Submission on that Poliwrath, and does 30 damage to 2 of your benched Pokemon. So obviously, with all this recoil damage being 30, we can negate that completely with the Rough Seas Stadium card, which goes really well with the cards in this deck. Once during your turn, you can heal 30 off of all of your water or electric Pokemon. So if we do end up using the Submission or the Grenade Hammer, we can just use the Rough Seas to heal all of that damage off. So the rest of the cards in the deck, it's going to be pretty straightforward. I'm running 2 copies of the Shaymin-EX just to use that setup ability for draw support. I'm running 2 copies of the Dive Ball, a really nice card in this deck considering pretty much all of the attackers you're going to be using are water, so just lets you search for whatever water Pokemon you need and put it into your hand. 2 copies of the Escape Rope, pretty straightforward there. 4 copies of the Evo Soda, just because we are running so many cards that rely on evolution here. It can be really nice to get exactly another Poliwhirl or a Politoed or a Poliwrath into play that you need. 2 copies of the Rare Candy. This you don't use as often, but it can be nice just to get an early Politoed into play and get attacking right off the bat. 2 copies of the Switch, 2 copies of the Ultra Ball. I don't think we need more than 2 because we are running 2 copies of the Dive Ball in this deck. 3 copies of the VS Seeker, 2 copies of the Lysander, 1 Pokemon Fan Club, 3 Professor Birch's Observations, 3 Sycamores, 1 Teammates, 2 Wallies. I think the Wally's a really nice addition to this deck because it allows you to evolve a Pokemon, even if you did already evolve that Pokemon once or just played it. So, for example, you could, on your second turn, play a Poliwhirl and then use the Wally to get a Politoed into play. Really quickly there, I'm running 4 copies of the Muscle Band to increase our damage output because as you can see, the attackers you're going to be using the most, the Poliwhirl and the Poliwrath, are unable to get one-hit knockouts on opposing Pokemon EX. Even the Seismitoad-EX with the Grenade Hammer and a Muscle Band is only hitting for 150 damage. So I'm running 4 copies of the Muscle Band, which will increase the damage output of your Steamroll to 80, plus 32 of bench Pokemon, so that's going to allow you to do a little more damage, and like I said, the finishing blow for 120. Add those up and you will be able to get 2-hit knockouts on opposing Pokemon EX, but basically the main advantage this deck has over other decks in the format currently is that it is pretty fast, and it is incredibly energetically efficient because none of the attacks you'll be using essentially rely on any energies with this line. That is, so because of that, you can get attacking really quickly. It's very versatile and resistant to like opposing Lugia EX, for example, because you're not attaching those energies to your Pokemon. So the 4 Muscle Bands, the 4 double colorless, just in case you don't get a Politoed out, this will help you do the submissions, stuff like that, the Steamrolls, because then you only need 2 energy attachments. And then 4 copies of the Water Energy. You don't necessarily need more just because, like I said, the King Song kind of negates your need for energy in this deck. So rounding out the deck is 60 cards. So I'm going to go ahead and bring this match to you here on the Pokemon Trading Card Game Online, testing out our Frogs and Toads deck, and to see if we can pull off a victory here, trying to overpower our opponents with this pretty speedy deck. In my starting hand, I got a couple Poliwags and a Seismitoad-EX. Now that's perfect because, like I said, you're going to be trying to slow down your opponents with the Seismitoad-EX's Quaking Punch so that you can get your Politoed out and begin using your Frogs to attack. So I'm going to go ahead and start with that Seismitoad as my active, and then I'll throw a couple Poliwags on the bench. Now I've got a couple cards that I can use here. I'll throw the Muscle Band onto the Seismitoad-EX. Unfortunately, my opponent does choose that Registeel, but because it requires 2 energy attachments to begin using that Forbidden Iron Hammer, I will be able to potentially get a couple, or 1 Quaking Punch off before I can do so. Now, I've got a few cards in my hand. I got a Dive Ball. This will allow me to grab onto another Water-type Pokemon. I could grab onto another Seismitoad-EX, but what I think I will do instead is grab onto a Poliwhirl. And I'll go ahead and attach 1 Water Energy to my Seismitoad-EX. Since I don't have the double colorless, I'll just go ahead and do that because I would really like to get a Quaking Punch off before my opponent discards my energies. Fails the roller skates there, which is pretty nice. In my next turn, I will be able to evolve one of my Poliwags into a Poliwhirl, and then I could use the Wally to get a Politoed out. And then I'll just go ahead and use the Evo Soda to get a Poliwhirl and begin building up another one so I can begin attacking that way. Now, since he does use the Escape Rope, forces me to switch out, but I've got a Poliwag. I'll go ahead and evolve that Poliwhirl there. And then I have the Evo Soda, so I'll go ahead and grab another Poliwhirl. And then I can attach that to this Poliwag, and then I actually have the Wally as well, so I will grab onto a Politoed at this time. And I'll attach it to this Poliwhirl, so I can use the Finishing Blow attack to do 50 damage to my opponent's Registeel there. Now, during my next turn, since this Registeel does have damage counters on it, my Finishing Blow will be hitting for 100 damage to that Registeel. So unless he plays another Pokemon to his bench, this is going to be an incredibly quick victory for us here, showing off the deck. Looks like my opponent's going to be hitting for an Iron Head, 30 damage, or 30 times the number of heads that he's able to roll. So hopefully he's not able to roll 3 heads. Unfortunately, he does have the Pokemon Center Lady as well, so I won't be able to hit for 100 during my next turn. Oh, he doesn't have the Steel Energy, excuse me, so that doesn't even matter. But I'll go ahead and attach a Muscle Band to my Poliwhirl, and then I'll do the Finishing Blow for 70 damage. Again, my opponents must be really vying to try to get a Steel-type energy so they can begin using the Iron Head, lest they fall to my Finishing Blow this early into the match. I'm really enjoying using this deck, though. I haven't seen anybody else, I don't think, ever using it. These cards were all released with Furious Fists, but it seems to be pretty effective. You know, obviously, one of the main disadvantages of this deck is the increasing usage of Grass-type Pokemon, since all of my Pokemon are weak to Grass typing. Unfortunately, I only drew onto the Poliwrath, so I do have the Steamroll that I will be able to use soon, but my Seismitoad is my active, so not exactly the best Pokemon to be in my active there, but I digress. So if you're phasing, for example, Sceptile-EX, Mega Sceptile-EX, Heracross, Mega Heracross-EX, and then of course always the Vespiquen, the weakness will just not be to your advantage. Now, I was able to top deck that Shaymin-EX, which is absolutely perfect, drew the Rough Seas, another Poliwag, and I have yet another energy that I can attach to my Seismitoad-EX, so I will be able to begin using the Quaking Punch, knocking out the Registeel. Got the Sycamore, but I don't think I even need to use it right now since I'm knocking out that Registeel and drawing onto a prize card. My opponent's only Pokemon left is that Fennekin, which will, of course, fall to any of my Pokemon's attacks. So, feeling pretty good about our position right now. This is obviously a good type matchup for us. So, the other thing I have neglected to mention as of yet is instead of running the Rough Seas, which I believe is the best card, the Stadium card in this deck, you could also run the Training Stadium because that will increase the HP of your Poliwrath and your Politoed and your Poliwhirl to 110, 170, and 160, which would allow you to survive Pokemon EX's attacks. However, I don't think it synergizes as well since the healing is particularly nice for the recoil of the Submission and the Grenade Hammer. So it looks like I will be able to win the game here, so I'll just go ahead, use the Escape Rope, and then use the Steamroll to hit for 160 damage, beating my opponent there. So that's kind of a look at how the deck works. I think I'm going to go ahead and find another match here in the Pokemon Trading Card Game Online to show you another example of how the deck works and see if we can get another victory with it, just because that first match was a little anticlimactic. My opponent wasn't able to draw onto cards that would have helped him out. Looks like my opponent is going to be using a Psychic, Normal, and Electric type deck this time, so good to see that we're not facing down a Grass type deck. No basic Pokemon, and a Poliwag is my starting Pokemon today. I've got the Poliwhirl and the Poliwrath, and the Evil Soda. Really hope I could top deck like a Supporter or something. Birch's Observations would be great. Drew the Lysander, so not exactly what I was trying to draw onto because I can't do anything now. So I'll just go ahead and end my turn once again, and Birch's Observations would be ideal in this situation. Pokemon Fan Club also would be pretty good since I could use that to draw onto a Shaman EX. My opponent, getting the 7 cards from the Birch's Observations, plays 2 Pikachu down, so have not seen an opposing Pikachu used unless it's in the Rough Seas. Okay, interesting. I was going to say, I've been seeing some increase in usage of the Circle Circuit Raichu with the Skyfield Stadium and Rayquaza, since it allows you to hit for more damage, but apparently not today. So I guess what I will do is use the Escape Rope just so my opponent's active doesn't have any energy attached to it. Did evolve that Poliwhirl there, and then I guess I will unfortunately have to Sycamore to draw onto some more cards. Muscle Band is nice. I will actually go ahead and just attach that double colorless there because I don't have a second Politoed line going at the moment, and I would really like to begin attacking with that finishing blow since I will be able to KO my opponent's Pikachu if I do draw onto yet another energy card. So I'm sitting here now with my Poliwhirl, really desperately hoping that I'm able to draw onto something helpful in our next turn. Now, something else that I did mention, or I did not mention, but is relevant here as well, is that I could evolve this with the Politoed. I think I will during my next turn, and if I am able to draw onto a water energy, either top deck it or using the Sycamore, I will be able to begin using the Hyper Voice attack to hit for 90 damage. Although I said that you would probably never use it, this might just be the one time that I actually end up using that. So if you do have spare energies, which doesn't happen very often because I run very few energies in this deck, you can also begin attaching energies to the Politoed and then keeping that as a backup attacker, since it does only require 2 energies. A DCE and a water energy to attack with the Hyper Voice. So the Circle Circuit Raichu that I was describing does come out, but I will be able to heal with my Rough Seas, evolve the Politoed, and then go ahead and use the Sycamore to draw into some more cards. I'll lay that down, the Seismitoad-EX, and I will attach a Muscle Band to it. I'll go ahead and attach a Water Energy here, and then use the Hyper Voice attack to hit for 90 damage, exactly enough to knock out that Raichu. So my opponent has not been able to draw onto cards that have been beneficial to him at this time as well. A bit unfortunate, as I was hoping to potentially face down opposing Pokemon EX in a deck to see how this stands in the current metagame, although my 2 opponents have been running fairly atypical decks. We do see the Lugia EX come out though, so that's a decent attacker. Get the energy attachment on there. So I'll be intrigued to see if he's able to do anything with that. Fortunately, I'm not able to attack with my Politoed this turn. That's quite alright. I have the Fan Club, so I can draw onto a Shaman EX and a Poliwag, which I'll then lay down. go ahead, lay the double colorless onto the Seismitoad because I'd like to get some sort of switch off of this Seismitoad-EX. So I'll go ahead, lay the muscle band onto the Poliwag, since that will end up being a Poliwhirl and a Poliwrath probably. Use the Seismitoad-EX's setup to draw some additional cards. Got a couple more Poliwags, which is nice. And what I can do is retreat. I'll just discard the water energy, bring out the Seismitoad-EX, and then use the Quaking Punch attack to hit for 50 damage and prevent my opponent from using any of those item cards that he may wish to use. Now, of course, Seismitoad does rely on that DCE, so that Lugia-EX will be able to hit for 80 damage if it does get another energy attachment to it. Of course, my opponent with the Pikachu is able to make use of that Rough Seas as well, healing off 30 of that damage, but my next Quaking Punch will still be able to knock it out. Now, I do have another water energy. I'm just going to go ahead and attach that to the Politoed again, because just in case I want to use that as an attacker, none of the Poliwags that I will use eventually as a steamrolling Poliwrath would require any of those water energies. So I'll go ahead and use these Birch's Observations, draw into 4 cards, and excellent, I have the Dive Ball and the Evo Soda. So unfortunately, I discarded all of my Poliwhirls in one of those earlier Sycamores, since I wasn't drawing onto the cards that I needed it. I discarded 2 of them, which is a bit unfortunate. If only Sacred Ash were still standard format, but I digress. Quaking Punch here, going to be knocking out that Pikachu, preventing my opponent from using any item cards, and I draw into 1 more prize card. Currently, my girlfriend and I are house-sitting her parents' cats since they're in China, so it's been fun having some cats around here, but they also like to chew on my cords and eat the flowers behind me, so a bit unfortunate there. So, brings the Lugia out, but again, does not have any energy attachments for that, so the Evo Soda is going to be useless because I don't have those Poliwhirls, so unfortunately this time around I will not be able to use the Poliwraths or the Poliwhirls finishing blows, so do have the VS Seeker, however, so what I will do, use the Birch's Observations off of that VS Seeker, have the Ultra Ball. Now there might be another one, since there's Poliwhirl here, excuse me, on that line, and then there are only 2 in my discard pile. That means that there is 1 that is left prized. So if I am able to KO one of my opponent's Pokemon, potentially I could get one of those lines going, but I have these 2 water energies that I'm going to attach to this side of the node so I can use the Grenade Hammer in my next turn to knock this Lugia out. A bit of a risky play, considering all he needs is 1 energy attachment to begin hitting me for 100 damage, but since I already did have that 50 damage on that Lugia-EX from my previous Quaking Punch, the next Grenade Hammer will be able to hit for 150, knocking it out. So this is a decent example of how the deck runs, as he was able to hit me for 100 with that energy attachment, but the second water energy here, using the Rough Seas as well, will be able to hit for 150, and then I'll just do 30 damage to each of those, since I could have healed it off in my next turn with the Rough Seas, but that's yet another victory for this deck. So feel free to try it out, and feel free to share your successes with me down below as a comment. So if you like this video, again, like, comment, subscribe. I am Diddy. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.